Ah, yes, hello, Lost Legion. And so, we'll discuss. I'm not a Native American. I'm not a Native American. But the Child Tribe is about their forsaken rights that they don't even believe that, everyone sees the odds of cities. What colonization, forced be the pathology, fake, all kinds of everything, fact treatments to everything with standards. There was no freedom and there was no free competition, all that, etc. There's no way to describe it because each of the nations were only realized manifest as roles with and as it criminally legalized. And so when you're criminally legalized, you're defending justifications of fact treatment as a measured criminal insidiousness nature in relationship to this. Relationship to how our branches were motivated to play roles with colonization's entrenched breaching torture fact treatment methods. And worse, that's what it was, torture fact treatment methods. Always. With colonization's breaching laws per a method that stayed with the early states too, because they had to go through their campuses, internation sciences, and this was forcing, for fact treatment nature phenomena, it was forcing England to be the fake side of it here, as what was exploiting them at home, holding their kings as fact treatment natures that were extorted, and were cultivated to but not be able to make the fact treatments in justification of that because of money. And so now everyone at the bottom up was searching. Now everyone was consciously being cultivated to blame things on money, consciously being cultivated to use physical delusions with and as convictions, not its nature, which is a sequenced nature, and which is the nature of forgiveness in relationship to this, with our fact treatments. In other words, because not one nation's state, areas and state and top down has credibility, and they're worse than measured as live progression cover-up styles, abridged, and with a relationship to abridgment. In other words, what our founders had their extortion not explained to us yet for, and how and why. And so we're going to understand this, and that's why we need to understand predicate value in the value of the predicate act, because in relationship to how it's in demonstration how the identities of value share a common value, which is the nature itself, and which is a value-nature relationship to itself. This is what compressed its own nature here to progress its value, and will not let to progress overall positives identity as space with the phenomena of the value of immediate space. It is demonstrating Leith of Hadith, forced space nature transfer. In other words, an identity as itself that is negative onto itself as a quality of diffusion, meaning no matter which body it's in, discourse, it forces it away. Forced space nature transfer. The opposite of that is the cause of evolution. See, we're going to see the sciences were set up as natures cultivated to ulterior motives and needs, and as ulterior natures ulterior from the truths, as abridged fact treatment styles and roles. And this is very serious too, because we have to be able to describe the rackets on our areas, immediate areas, and to explain, and we have to be able to report predators, and that's not being let because the predators are involved with police forms using the right to lie with and as natures only let realized manifest juxtaposed with and as commonly shared breached nations in relationship to forced shared police markets positions, forced shared agreements to cover that up, in other words, because you can't police, you have to not. That's why they all, in other words, we have the knowledge, even if we're not even though we're not, we know that they have undercover and things like that. See, the fake news is also in relationship to phenomena. They're blaming on other things because they don't understand the role, the extent of it, but through their own needs to realize to cover up their exploitations of only realized standing misprision criminality natures, fact treatment styles. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. We're going to examine this with the religions are trying to talk about together in relationship to the predicate value and with the predicate act, because it's with every science. This is about the algorithm. This is about the algorithm. This is how I'm going to teach how I could show more. In other words, someone could know more knowledge than me, the experts, and they could know it all together too. But they're not being able to use correlation. In other words, so even computers, which I'm not literate in those things, just beyond the basics, but see, so how could I teach them about what the algorithm is? This is what English is revealed to teach, how the sciences share an identity. The algorithm is truth's relationship to itself. We have abridged truth. So we have policings of all the different internet sites that are sequence shifting, lie, progression, cover up natures. They're fact treatment natures and styles that, justifying themselves, need to pretend passions out of sequence, and they're invested to do that per training and per the relationship of original state areas with original state interscience corruption, intercampus corruption, and how it was originally areas maintained through the engineering of misprision fact treatment nature styles. By and how and through where the invisible nature, that the wind is invisible, but it's in demonstration of itself, to our sense, of the value of space. Has a clear value in the diffusion through itself, a forever nature. Forever nature is not with a body. Body is for a quality of diffusion. This diffusion is either positive or negative onto itself, inherently, actively, and progressively. When it is negative value nature onto itself, it becomes, and stays negative value nature relationship to itself somewhere else. See, consciousness is only a temporary positive nature. And negative, it's still a nature, so it still has the identity of positive, but it's negative onto itself. And in other words, if you be the identity that is positive always, it's also a ratiocination's identity. It's also seeking to stay this always, and noting exceptions. Because then this sees the identity, this sees clear means, it sees evolution. It realizes the sequence nature of space is positive, will only stay positive unto itself, inherently, actively, and progressively. That progression becomes evolution when we stay using what is inherent and unchanging about that demonstration course between positive and negative here in immediate space to discern bodies of value. And this is why and how the Old Testament, the first part of it, just the first part of it, says if you understand this, that's all you need to understand. And the rainbow is a tool for this. And see, everything is obfuscated, every single science. And we're talking about identity of value. And psychology is tied to courts, and tied to probate courts, tied to other natures of courts, and tied to prisons, where they're using that to cover up their roles as a fact treatment torture method, and uncharged originally in state, criminally tied to prisons too, tied to area crimes used to cover up, with agencies covering up with their natures, how they've been with their own agencies. In other words, in relationship to context, where the investigations are already invested to and as natures, where the defenses of that are only capable of being reliant upon expert lean, a hierarchical justifications of that, natures of that are simultaneously incapable of dealing with how our agencies are juxtaposed with and as foreign agencies originally in state, and how they were there too. And this is in relationship to the fact, treatment, torture method of our stewards, of our top down, of our presidents and chiefs. Note in POTUS. Note 3 names. The ancient campus Marcius in this ancient republic was stolen. Its means from, it was criminally re-engineered, stolen from Native Americans. So I'm not trying to say I'm a Native American, but we're going to try to be what we were when we were a species together as positive value nature, as a correlation body, correlation nation. To your correlation stations, please. Ratiocination is an active form of correlation, inherently actively and progressively. And the active part is with bodies of value, and value is a nature only, so it's conditional, like the wind, in demonstration to us of the body of the clear value. As between the night, how many times is the day and night going to shift, and we can't see it's pointing to the clear? Because we're stuck with pseudo-education, not demonstrated, because we have a criminal insidiousness natures to all areas invested to defend roles with that as theater, in relationship to the suit and tie too. In relationship to we're going to examine how and why. We have a common enemy. Our nations, how effective it is. See, when they say fakes, when they make, they're cultivating Russians against Russians and Americans against Americans, because it's easier. That's the only way they know how to do it. And plus, they were trained that way criminally. Plus, it was areas maintained for them to blame it on other all. Before the branches were realized corrupt, with our founders' extortion outlet demonstrated, not ratiocination outlet used, because this notes exceptions. This doesn't have agencies as nature is sick, and quote and just saying, oh, that's the perfect world. We can't defend it because they're hurt conviction natures, because they're pseudo-edgy. All I have to do is admit that we have all the recorded proofs, even if the news is fake, especially when the news is fake, and in relationship to what is not fake. Relationship to all. We have all kinds of different internation families that were associated with 9/11 crimes, and with the Trade Center, and within that as fact treatment natures, as victim predators, and that was made to cultivate that further. But it was also used to cover up lie progressions that were inherited personally, misprision, and top down to the investigators associated with that, including interstate fire department investigators, which, especially if it was made up about the Rocky Hill firefighters with the shootout or whatever like that, that's also involved with the roles with all kinds of natures of crime against each age of fact treatment nature. And this is how, in other words, we're going to see methods, especially the uses of roles with the probate courts with the elderly homes. These are not our means. And at the same time, with poverty. At the same time, with everyone's odds in relation to what we do with it. In other words, invested, needing to keep going with the value nature system we have. Invested to and as fact treatment natures with a fake free markets, with denatured, tactically denatured relationship to nature itself, because it's a breaching method that knew that it could keep all nations cultivated as fighting to defend lie progressions in relationship to databases as lie progression cover-up natures in relationship to where the truth could demonstrate that with correlation. In other words, we're even the very smart and very wise internet companies, and when they talk about an algorithm, we're going to talk about what they're talking about, and without even having to understand computers, because it's a quality of diffusion, and this is about correlation, which is using changing and unchanging variables. In other words, it's noting exceptions. It's not abridged free speech. And it's not a quality of free speech that is not allowed to show formal roles with evidence rackets that's been through, with areas through times, with military, how these, with medical corruption, pseudo healthcare since before our founding, not by accident, tied to courts and prisons, and nature's with that, how cultivated that is, breaching nature, hurt conviction natures, delusion propagation natures. And what they do, they pretend value by sharing needs to pretend it, so they say that their job is value. So they have jobs that are predator, breaching roles in nature. And see, that's why the most important thing in me, in my life, what I want, is to be able to speak about America. Not about just America, but the world, about what the nature wants us to speak. And see, this isn't being let, because you're supposed to be, and you're there. Everyone, we have every nature of business with fact treatment natures forced on an expert lean with that. In other words, and we have, like, in other words, school bullying. The same movements behind countering that are the same movements using it to cover up their personal misprision and top-down lie progression natures, roles with breaching natures and acts through time as criminal insidiousness natures, like wrongdoers, like associate criminals in relationship and in relationship to a nature of organized crime that has our nations as recorded admitted criminal insidiousness nature roles. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police foreman, but this is, in other words, but as everyone's agreeing, when the president says they're not telling the truth, they're not lying on the sequence. In other words, see, that we know that they had a Russian spy compound. So why would they need that? Because of the nature of the chemicals in relationship to the originally in state areas criminally persuaded and used lie progression cover-up natures, fact treatment natures, breaching roles. See, now it's juxtaposed with each one of the sciences. And that's in relationship to where they have shared policing needs in order to keep the progressions with nuclear bombs. And with militaries agreed to be fake patriotism natures, reliant upon breached expert lean in orders. We're no one can think about except for counters. They can't think correlation, which is the nature of the Constitution abridged, and how our own founders forced extortion, forced glorified in our faces. To your places, nations to your correlation stations, please. All we have to do is admit this with negative, turning negative value, turning negative into positive. The positive is there, but positive, its identity, as an identity of value, is the one that is always inherently, actively, and positively in demonstration to as if we're right or wrong. And it doesn't work through like notions of peace or unity. That is not unity by it. In other words, you can get all the nations to agree to keep this pathology, but it's still going to trash everything, because it's going to cause negative value nature progressions as blamed on other, as it was set up to do, because that's per the nature of it. And we're going to understand the nature of the law and why and how. It's so important. It's critical at every moment to understand overall value is a nature as value, inherently, actively, and progressively. Heaven and hell is in relationship to this, because we only have now as the quality of diffusion we are. Not just We only have, that's what we only have now. And this is three ways. This is with, to both sexes and the species body at the same time. Positive. It has to be positive by the rest of the nature too. And because it's correlation nature. And when we do that, and when we're just trying to do that, not in relationship to comparison. In other words, not relationship to sides that are entertained as sides, but in relationship to how we're going to attach new means to all areas. We're going to change the nature of our fact treatment nature. We're not going to change it. We're going to relieve it. We're going to bring legal reliefs for the nature of the law into all fact treatment nature roles, all victim predator roles, except for Romulus. We're going to be Romulus together. And we're going to give back to ourselves Native American rights. It means denature, tactically denature before modern nations. This was with what was with the means to the extent of the extortion of our founders. Sure, we try. Inherent to each shadow is the way. Now we're going to examine the shadow, what stays in the shadow of Trinity College. They don't want to, and with what George Washington had to counter-extort in Connecticut, in Hartford and Wethersfield, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. Note a war is different than a revolution. Note the extortion of our founder recorded, known. But then in relationship to still glorified, forced glorifications of the extortion of our founders and of the religions as sick roles with it. In other words, it wasn't real religion. It wasn't truths. There was cherry tree, fake branches, and rolls to it to all areas. Against our human nature, blaming our other. And then they start comparing and say, who's doing like it? And that's what it's progressing. The comparison is a negative value nature. Correlation is positive value nature. As identity, a value, positive. Temporary value nature is negative value nature. Forever nature is positive value nature. Forever nature is in demonstration to us of and as our value, as our identity. See how all the parts of our body die? But the identity is of inherent, active, and progressive value. See, but this is three ways at once, too, as a species. As overall. The rest of the earth has no criminal persuasions, especially no criminally legalized persuasions. To understand this, we're going to talk about criminal enterprise. The whole world is going to understand the criminal enterprise and how each nation's fake guys. The only way you can do this, understanding how they were forced as hurt reaction nature roles, the pseudo-identities. This is what they're doing with the shared ill policing and psychology delusion propagating with Russia in here. With our original nation's colonizers in here. With Asia's divide and conquer Asia with prison ties to probate court and other standards. See how we're all in the same top-down nature of buildings that was forced to have it invested as a bridge fact treatment natures, as lie progression cover-up natures, invested that way, blaming our other. Now you're breaching nature, breaching roles. You're hurting others. See how we can't explain the people stacking in our face? We're not allowed free speech. That's not free competition. We have the means. First, you fix what's denatured before you even just dream of talking about free markets and stuff like that. In other words, you can't be your standing evidence fabrication nature, any nation in relationship to Africa. The only reason they get away with it because each nation is torturing each other in a relationship to how our agencies and nations are forced as identities abroad as well by forced shared market positions that we're forced invested in. In other words, as fake sides. So everyone's being trained to play the game as is or get hurt. So everyone's just playing the game by the rules there. So we have rules We have agencies incapable of defending the rules. The reason why is because they're victim predators because of an interscience problem with their fact treatment nature. And the reason why it was that because it was set up per an areas method with everyone measured odds as live progression cover-up natures as engineered. Tall areas, roles, fact treatment styles abridged, blaming on other, blaming on money, blaming on human nature, blaming on the whites, the blacks, forced, written that law. Those laws were, in other words, clear value is in demonstration to us. That's our identity. And when it's not, it demonstrates with negative value nature progressions, lead to hadiths. And when we are, that's evolution. See how long they've obfuscated what evolution is? See how long they've held the religions to what fact treatment natures with areas that are, holding what is not true always. Forced, not only respected, which is all right, but by itself, but then being the only, the sciences. They're using these are just roles with the area's original state, real, we have live progression cover-up natures, breaching natures of it, as all fake patriotism natures, every modern nation. And that's what our soldiers are leaned on. That's what our undercover agents abroad here, as reflected by the reports of the true, or even if made up, especially if made up, reports of the Russian spy den, also recorded, involved with the other internation families, with the area crimes, associated with live progression cover-ups with the formal 9/11 crimes in the court, and with the police forms, and with the interstate fire investigators recorded and involved, too, with untimely deaths tied to it, with Trinity College tied to the same group, with the one that brought up a grammar school to me here. They're not letting me report it, and they have strangers just openly with child predators slandering victims of it and not letting it reported, and it's recorded. And they've been using fake passions on Facebook and on other media to pretend they believe things that they want courts to settle, because the courts grew up with nature. In other words, they were cultivated live progression, cover-up needs, natures, and roles with them already. So, and they were, in other words, crimes recorded and confessed further with databases. They're stacking databases with areas. They're pretending people were in hospitals they were never in. They're pretending they were in conversations they were never in. Police forms are doing that, using the right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie for. They're getting away with it because how they're being stayed